The next session is about challenges in writing with respect to ability in Indian languages. And I now request the panelists, Soni, Anusha, and Nimgaru, if you can turn your video on. I can actually manually request everyone to start video. Nimgaru, ఒక్కసారి మీరు మీ వీడియో ఆన్ చేయగలరా? Perfect. Huh. Hi Anusha, hi Soni. Hello Nimgaru. Can everybody hear us? Like, are we audible? Yes, I think.
Sony is muted. Sony is muted. Sony is muted.
Sony is not muted.
Yes.
No. Sony, can you see?
I think you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. నిమ్గారు మీరు కనిపించట్లేదు. సో ఇఫ్ యూ మీరు కొంచెం వీడియోని కెమెరాని స్ట్రైట్ చేయగలరా? మేము వినిపిస్తున్నామా? Don't think he can hear us. Yoshita, could you call him once and see if he can hear us? నిమ్గారు మేము మాట్లాడేది వినిపిస్తుందా?
I just wanted to thank Sony. Sony, thank you very much. Ashwini here.
Thank you, Ashwini.
Yeah, my video is not working, so you can't see me. My host has stopped my video, but thank you, the way you responded, and I'm very delighted. I'm grateful to you, Sony. Thank you. You can't see me, unfortunately, it's muted, my video. Anyway, you know me. Thank you very much.
Hi. Yoshita, if you can just call Nimgaru once, and then I can start introducing the session. And this session is going to have live translation, which I'm going to do myself. So it would be, the structure would be slightly different from the previous sessions. Yes. So we will be translating everything Nimgaru says. We'll be translating from Telugu to English, and I'll do it in the order. And I'm having some questions that I'll be dividing among the panelists, and some questions are common for everybody. Yeah, now the camera is straight. Nimgaru, mem matlade vinpistonda? It's connecting audio. Okay, I can't see anybody. Hello, Nimgaru, mem matladedi vinpistonda? Hello? Okay, so I am just going to start the session with introduction to the session, and then I'll move on to introductions of the panelists, and after that I will start asking questions, and some of the questions that will go towards Nimgaru will be also translated into Telugu, and whatever he says will be translated back into English. So a little bit about the session that we are going to start today. It is, the way I see it, conversations about challenges in writing. Frequently, literature makes villains out of individuals with disability, and they are relegated to the margins. More and more physically challenged writers have reclaimed this literal space through their writing or art, with their experiences and identities in the focus. Our panel today consists of a wide range of panelists of different age groups who have shaped their own narratives and given voices to their characters in this space. We have with us artist and writer Nim, poet Soni Somarajan, and Anusha Mishra from the Revival Disability magazine, as they share their perspectives with us. Before I begin this session, I would actually like to apologize in advance for anything that may sound ignorant or insensitive in the current context of discussion and representation. And another thing is, like I mentioned earlier, I will be moderating the session, and my primary role will be just asking questions to the panelists and translating Nimgaru's answers from Telugu to English. He, I think, is still trying to connect audio. I'm going to try again. Nimgaru, me matladedi vinpistonda? ఓకే, మీరు ఒకసారి నేను అడిగిన తర్వాత మీరు అన్మ్యూట్ కూడా నేను మిమ్మల్ని అన్మ్యూట్ చేస్తాను. నేను ప్రతిసారి ప్రశ్న అడిగినప్పుడు దాన్ని ఇంగ్లీష్లో తెలుగులో ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేసి మిమ్మల్ని అడుగుతాను. మీరు ఆన్సర్ చెప్పిన తర్వాత నేను ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేస్తాను. మీరు అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకోవాలండి మిమ్మల్ని. ఓకే, Sorry for that. So we'll get back to, I'm just going to quickly introduce our panelists today. So Nim is author, cartoonist, poet, and lyricist, screenplay writer, and a qualified Ayurvedic doctor who doesn't actually practice right now. His full name is Bamiridipalli Narasimhamurthy, and his pen name is Nim. He's also a prominent creative personality in Hyderabad. He scripts ballets based on social and mythological themes. Apart from writing and cartooning for television, he has also lent his work to Telugu films award, and also the recipient of 4 prestigious Nandi Awards that are bestowed upon by the Andhra Pradesh state government. Our next panelist is Soni Somarajan. Soni is a poet, copywriter, editor, and content consultant living in Thiruvananthapuram. His work has featured in News India, the Northeast Review, among other publications. He's the alumni of the University of Iowa's IWP Advanced Poetry Seminar. Soni is the creative head at the Quarantine Train. First Contact, his debut collection of poetry, was published in 2020. Thank you for joining us, Soni. Our next panelist is Anusha Mishra. Anusha is a student of Lady Shri Ram College. She is a disability rights activist and the founder of Revival Disability Magazine, an online magazine on disability, sexuality, and intersectional feminism. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for joining us today for what we hope to be an extremely enriching conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a few leading questions for each one of you. And the first question that I'm going to ask is actually for all 3 of you. So the way we do this is I'll read out the question and I'll quickly read that question in Telugu for Blim Garu also, and then we can take turns answering that. Will that do? All right, thank you so much. So the first question is, how has your living experience with your ability shaped your worldview? How do you think it made you look at the world differently, a world formed and written by able-bodied people? నిమ్ గారు, ఇదే ప్రశ్న నేను మీకు తెలుగులో మారుస్తున్నాను. మీ శారీరక సామర్థ్యం సాయంతో జీవించడం మీ జీవన దృక్పథాన్ని ఎలా ఏ విధంగా ప్రభావితం చేసింది? మామూలు మనుషులు నిర్దేశించే ఈ ప్రపంచంలో మీ 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 వరల్డ్ వ్యూ ఎట్లా షేప్ అయింది? Yeah, anybody can take that question. Soni, if you could take that question first.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And can you hear me?
Yeah, you might have to be slightly louder.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, good.
To answer your question, I think I'll just give a little brief introduction to my institution. In my institution, I have a degenerative disorder, the LGMD, which is genetic, and began when I was 17, just when I had 12th standard. Studying in a military public school meant that armed forces was going to be my default career choice. Nothing else was in the picture. But the advent of this particular disease meant that it was no longer an option ever. For a while, I was confused by the sudden turn of it. I chose to pursue English literature for my graduation, considering I was good at school and I loved the language. I would credit my education in a military school for having shaped me well enough to adjust the sudden mishap and learn to live with my disability. In school, we were taught while young to be tough, endure circumstances, and think on to find solutions in case of a setback. Having those strengths built in has always helped me to adjust to life. It doesn't mean that it has been a smooth progression all along, but the fact is that I do not like to wallow too much in an adverse situation. I always want to shake it off and reach for a solution. Choosing happiness. Usually disabled people learn to adapt and develop certain attitudes to deal with the implications. I remain grateful that though not intentional, I was already prepared to meet such an eventuality in the boot camp of my school. the world, as I see it, is generally ill-informed about this disease unless someone in their immediate world. Of course, natural and actually inaccess any change to equalize the human experience takes its own time because as you know, this segment is never a vote bank, nor does it have any political say, nor are lawmakers are well educated or educated enough to believe for legislations in place for the cause of it. Legislation sometimes can even be seen as a piecemeal treatment of issues. What lacks is you know, from what I learned from my condition, what lacks is the spirit of compassion. And, has been my biggest learning too from my disability. And compassion must actively be part of society's framework when it comes to dealing with disability, not as a trade-off. Anyway, my condition has opened my eyes to compassion as a leading value for our modern world. And its relative lack of importance in human affairs is what is leading to the alienation of people. I think we choose compassion and understand the moment to power all our endeavors and choose to make other lives better. And this value of compassion, I am sure everybody would agree, everyone here would agree, is easier to learn when you are affected in some way, especially by a disability. There is a greater understanding that comes to a greater understanding of laws and hence the ability to empathize with people who face roadblocks in their, and for that matter, even normal people as they go about their horrors of daily living.
Thank you so much, Soni. I think some of the words that you gave were extremely positive, and thank you for saying what you did. If I could, Nimgaru, if you could take meeri question prasna kya jawab cheptara? Yeah, meer koncham unmute chesukovalandi mimmali.
ఓకే
ఇప్పుడు మాట్లాడితే నేను ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేస్తాను తర్వాత.
ఫస్ట్ పాయింట్ ఏంటంటే నాకు హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ సర్టిఫికెట్ లేదు. నాకు అసలు నేను హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ అనే ఫీలింగే నాకు లేకుండా మా తల్లిదండ్రులు నన్ను పెంచారు. నాకు అన్నిటికన్నా పొగరు ఎక్కువ. నాకు ఏ పార్టీ ఇన్ఫీరియారిటీ లేనంత పొగరు నాకుంది. నేను నడవలేను కానీ పరిగెత్తించగలను, నేను పాడలేను కానీ పాడించగలను, ఆడలేను కానీ డాన్స్ ఆడించగలను, ఏ పనైనా నేను చేయగలనన్న విశ్వాసం నాకుంది. నాకు అన్ని రకాల కళల్లోనూ ప్రవేశం ఉండటానికి కారణం ఏంటంటే నేను ఫస్ట్ క్లాస్ కూడా స్కూల్కి వెళ్ళి చదువుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం రాలేదు నాకు. అందుకని నాకు తెలుగు ఒకటి బాగా వచ్చు, సంస్కృతం మా ఇంట్లో ఉంది కనుక కొంచెం కొంచెం తెలుసు. అందుకనే మిగిలిన భాషలు రాకపోవడం ఒక్కటే నేను హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ అనుకుంటున్నాను, కానీ నేను ఖచ్చితంగా హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ కాబోను.
ఓకే, అది ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేయమంటారా ఇప్పుడు? ఓకే, so Nimgaru says, I actually don't have a certificate that claims that I am physically challenged, and never have my parents ever brought me up to feel challenged physically either. And he in fact adds that he's proud of what he is, and he feels his sense of identity with a sense of pride. And also maybe the way he used the word proud is not exactly there's no equivalent word for what he used, pogaru in English, but pride is more or less what I can give you. He said something extremely artistic, which he said, I cannot walk but I can run, I cannot probably play but I think I can make people dance. And then he says because he has had so many avenues to do so many things, he also says that he's gotten to learn a lot way back in school, even though he did not really go to school formally. And then he adds that the only probable reason why he could consider himself handicapped is because he cannot speak many other languages other than Telugu and Sanskrit. That is probably the only reason where he thinks he is not able like the rest of the people are. Thank you so much for that insight, Nimgaru. Thank you. And I will come back to you. Meeku మీ దగ్గరికి మళ్ళీ వస్తాను ప్రశ్నతో. Anusha, if you're around and you could take the same question. Yes.
Yeah, Laza, can I switch off my video because the
Sure.
internet is really bad.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is something that I wrote recently, about growing up in an able-bodied world and the various nuances of acceptance and healing as a disabled woman in an able-bodied world. So, yeah, I'm just starting. It is no secret that we grow up lonely and lost in a world which has stairs rather than ramps, where disability is immediately attached to something inspirational and something that is placed on a pedestal that is in itself inaccessible. We grow up with able-bodied classmates and otherness in their eyes. They can't help but treat us differently. We grow up being excluded from conversation about dating, sex, all the bases, PG-13 stuff. We grew up with able-bodied ideals of competition, productivity, time, and independence. So looking back at my school days, I went to a school which had able-bodied students. I never really met anyone who was physically disabled like me. So as a result, looking back, the various subjects I studied psychology, which was related to able-bodied ideals. I studied literature, which showed an able-bodied Rosalind and Orlando falling in love. My maths teacher would make me draw straight lines, would insist that I drew straight lines. When I have a disabled left hand, so I find it difficult to draw straight lines, and that is completely okay. So I guess it took a lot of years. It took like 21 years, a lot of time for me to finally accept myself and, love curved lines. And yeah, it was definitely not easy. There was a lot of self-loathing and hatred as a result of my social environment. And also it took me a long time to accept my curvy, crooked fingers, my disabled fingers, and take pride in my disabled experience, because we grew up in an environment which tells us to quickly hide our crooked and bent fingers under our coats, and our environment that tells us that it is unattractive and hideous to be disabled. We grew up with fairy tales where only witches have crooked teeth, crooked fingers, crooked legs. We are often told that these are undesirable traits for a woman to possess. So an example is that, during college, my first year of college, I had this rule. I couldn't walk with my crutch while wearing a dress because that wasn't feminine enough. Because the media I had grown up consuming has certain ideas of feminism. A lady should be able-bodied, tall, fair, and yeah, and also like what we are taught to sit up straight or to keep our posture straight. And some disabilities, we aren't able to sit up straight.
Yeah.
So I think the very foundation of what we are taught, the very foundation of it is ableist. So unlearning and relearning from that has been quite a process. And yeah, the product is Revival Disability Magazine. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Anusha. That was extremely insightful, and I love some of the points you make. Thanks for shedding light on them. Now, I'm going to move on to the next question, and this question is particularly coming from some of the interviews that we read of Sony and also Nimgaru. And so, as usual, this is for the both of you. I'm going to read the question in English first and then in Telugu for Nimgaru. And Sony, if you could start answering first, and then we'll pass it on to Nimgaru. Yeah. So Sony, in your earlier interviews, you mentioned that writing poetry was cathartic for you, while Nimgaru has mentioned how cartooning was a turning point in his life and career. Could each of you like to shed some light on how art defines you and what your process is really like, and how art defines and gives you your unique voice? నిమ్గారు అదే ప్రశ్న సోనీ గారి తర్వాత మీరు జవాబు చెప్తారా? నేను ఇంగ్లీష్లో నేను తెలుగులో చెప్తాను క్వశ్చన్ని. కార్టూనిస్ట్ కావడం మీ జీవితాన్ని మార్చింది అని మీరు ఒక ఇంటర్వ్యూలో చెప్పారు. మీ కళ మిమ్మల్ని ఎలా డిఫైన్ చేసింది? అది క్వశ్చన్ అండి. Sony, if you could take that question first, and then we'll pass it on to me.
I think writing poetry, I mean, especially in the beginning when I started to write poetry, it was very cathartic. And in a way, my poetry says and makes known to the world that I'm right here. Hey, this is me, that sort of a thing. And I am kept away from you by the will of nature. Never aspired to something that is against my wishes. And my poetry is my way of saying hello to you. And in that, I must speak of myself in so many ways. What is the world I live in? What is it to be like? And the dreams I have, and my art is rather a narrative, a poetic narrative of my experiences, my memories, the dreams I have, my emotions about so many aspects of this world, and the trauma of my disability included. In a challenging world, there is a good reason for values to be healthier still. It is not necessary that you should be swept away by the forces of modernity. You can make a choice to be yourself and not become what you call a cookie cutter version of humans as the industry of the world. And you can choose not to conform, which should be more than words, and be an actual agent of change, working diligently. I mean, working diligently through my poetry to bring newness, to this world, and sounding different and singing different. So self-belief, what happens is most often the first casualty at the altar of what you would call conformity. So when you have fought all your life to be present here, to be counted as different as you are to the normal world, why not let my kind of poetry reflect that, become more than the beauty of a simple choice of words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sony. That was a great answer. Nimgaru, if మీరు జవాబు చెప్పగలరా? Yeah.
కార్టూనింగ్ ఓకే,
యా వినిపిస్తోందండి, చెప్పండి.
కార్టూనింగ్ నాకు చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్. నా కళలన్నింటికి కూడా చాలా ఉపయోగపడింది, చాలా గొప్పగా ఉపయోగపడింది. ఎందుకంటే సెన్స్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమర్ అనేది నాకు ఉండటం మూలాన్ని, కార్టూనింగ్ మూలాన్నే నాకు బాగా డెవలప్ అయింది. అసలు ఉండేది కార్టూనింగ్. నేను బాపు రమణల శిష్యుణ్ణి. రమణ గారు కామెడీ రైటర్ అని, బాపు గారు మంచి కార్టూనిస్ట్ అని అందరికీ తెలుసున్న విషయమే. వాళ్ళిద్దరికీ నేను ప్రియ శిష్యుణ్ణి అయ్యాను. వాళ్ళు నాకు అప్పుడు ఒకటి చెప్పేవాళ్ళు అన్నమాట, ఏదైనా చమత్కారం ఉండాలి, ఏదైనా అన్ని హాస్యమే కాదు కార్టూన్ అంటే, ఒక చమత్కారం అవ్వచ్చు, ఒక క్రిటిసిజం అవ్వచ్చు, ఒక కరెక్ట్ డైమెన్షన్ చూపడం అవ్వచ్చు. కార్టూనిస్ట్ కి చాలా కోణాలు ఉంటాయి చూడడానికి. నేను పాట రాసిన ఒక చిన్న చమత్కారం పెడతా, ఒక డైలాగ్ రాసిన, నేను కామెడీ సీరియల్ రైటర్ గా నాకు 4 సార్లు నంది అవార్డు కూడా వచ్చింది. కేవలం ఏంటంటే ఆ కార్టూనింగ్ దృక్పథం, ఆ మాట పైకి మాట్లాడేది ఒకటి, మనసులో ఒకటి ఉంటుంది ఏ మనిషికైనా. కార్టూనిస్ట్ ఆ రెండో మనిషిని కాగితం మీద పెడతాడు, మొదటి మనిషి వాడు ఉంటాడు. ఆ సెన్స్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమర్ అనేది కార్టూనిస్ట్ ప్రధాన లక్ష్యం. అది నాకు ఏ కళలో అయినా, నేను ఇప్పుడు డాన్స్ బ్యాలేలు రాస్తాను, కూచిపూడి క్లాసికల్ డాన్స్ బ్యాలెట్స్, దాంట్లో వాడతాను, డైలాగ్ వెర్షన్ లో వాడతాను. ఆ తర్వాత ఏదైనా ఎవరితోనైనా చెప్తున్నప్పుడు కూడా స్ట్రైట్ అవే చెప్పకుండా కొంచెం వ్యంగ్యంగా, కొంచెం సటైరికల్ గా, కొంచెం చమత్కారంగా చెప్తే అవతల వాడికి బాగా బుర్రకు పట్టుకుంటుంది. స్ట్రైట్ అవే నువ్వు వెళ్ళి కాఫీ పొడంతే అండం కన్నా టీ పొడం మాత్రం తేకే కాఫీ పొడమే అని చెప్పామనుకోండి, టీ పొడం మాత్రం తేకే అండంతో కాఫీ పొడం తేవాలని క్లియర్ గా అర్థమవుతుంది వాడికి రెండోసారి చెప్పడం వల్ల. అట్లా ఉంటుందన్నమాట. అందుకని కార్టూనిస్ట్ కి చాలా ఎక్కువ విస్తృతమైన ఆలోచన పరిధి ఉంటుంది. దాన్ని తన మిగిలిన కళల్లో ఇంప్రవైజ్ చేయడానికి చాలా గొప్పగా వినియోగపడుతుంది. సరిపోతుందా?
సరిపోతుంది. నాకు కొంచెం టైం పడుతుంది ట్రాన్స్లేషన్. సో మీకు ఇంకా ఆన్సర్ ఉంటే మీరు నేను ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేసిన తర్వాత చెప్పగలరు.
ఓకే.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a very good answer. So I'm going to try my best to translate that. So I think the essence of what he tried to say is that the cornerstone of the qualities that a cartoonist needs to possess is actually a sense of humor. And he's also mentioned how having that sense of humor has defined much of his work, whether it is writing ballets or whether it is writing scripts, dialogues, etc. And he also spoke about how he's taken the same sense of humor to his in his work with his gurus or mentors Bapu and Ramana, who are very famous artists and filmmakers in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana now.
Comedy writer.
And writers, yeah, and comedy writers. Yes, that's right. So what he says is there needs to be a sense of humor at the basis, at the genesis of everything that you do. And he says that that's also like he's won about 4 Nandi Awards, like mentioned earlier, for cartoon, for his comedy serial writing. And then he also says that he also brings this sense of humor into the Kuchipudi dance ballets he's written, for instance, and also into the dialogue. And there is this he likes to adopt satire and some sort of like slapstick snideness to the writing that he does. And for instance, he gave an example of how he likes to say things is, if you have to say to somebody something as simple as bring me coffee, if you tell them that for the first time, they might just not take it as seriously as if you go tell them the second time that, hey, listen, don't bring me tea, definitely bring me coffee, right? So that's this kind of style he tries to adopt. And he again emphasizes that I think for his art, sense of humor lies really at the heart of it. Antinabnim garu inkemana
yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering that question. The next question is actually this is actually more towards Sony. And I think I was reading a little bit about what you spoke about not having learned Malayalam in school. And then you spoke a little bit about your attachment then to learning Malayalam later on. If you could tell us a little bit about that journey, and also what you have tried to unearth, or what did you encounter with respect to representation of today's context of today's topic in Malayalam literature, or did you see anything that stood out or that did justice?
Of course, I mean, because I was an Air Force kid, I was not exposed to the sense of learning at an early age. I was Kendriya Vidyalaya,
Sony, 1 second. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Is there a possibility that you could be slightly louder or come closer to your screen because your voice is waking up a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Much clearer. Yeah.
Much clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, as an Air Force kid, I had my education in Kendra Vidyalaya and as an English medium school. So, my father was posted in various parts of India, and I never had an opportunity to learn my mother tongue, and I was not, you know, familiar with my the alphabets of my mother tongue until the age of 8 or 9. So, I mean, I have that very difficult relationship with my mother tongue, though, of course, I'm very much a Malayali. And I think it was somewhere in when I was 8 or 9, that I first actually came home for vacation, and my mother sent me to the neighboring house to learn the Malayalam alphabet. So my experience was that, if I describe that, is that along with the kids who were just being introduced to the Malayalam alphabet, they were like 2 or 3 years old, and I was this 9-year-old, and we were all sitting together on the floor, and there is this river sand laid out in a row sort of, and we are all sitting by its side and using our fingertips to actually learn the alphabet. So I was this very old kid, and relatively very older kid, and I was coming in into my first, you could call it my first encounter with the Malayalam alphabet. And so I remember, because the wisdom of having grown in the world that is outside the state, I mean, a 9-year-old wisdom, as you would call it, possibly. So when compared to, kind of a 3-year-old who has not seen the world much, you see more meaning in a new shape that is introduced to you, which is the Malayalam alphabet. So when I first saw or encountered the word, the alphabet R in Malayalam, it looked to me like an elephant. So, when I was writing my collection, when I started writing it out in 2015 or 2016, this uncomfortable relationship with my mother tongue, where I of course learned to, by now I can read it quite well. I still cannot write it, but, that remains my, kind of my greatest regret. But what I can say is I try to explore this really, kind of unique relationship with my mother tongue by taking these alphabets. And just as my memory goes back, about thinking about an elephant, what I did was I tried to describe that alphabet looking like an elephant through the poetry, and I tried to connect it with certain memories of my life. So I actually wanted to write only one alphabet, one alphabet as such. But eventually I realized that it, I couldn't stop there. And I had to try it with other alphabets as well, seeing all the shapes that I had imagined at that point of time with alphabets. So in a way, you can see that there is a very objective relationship, there. I am not inside my mother tongue. I stand outside it still. And I think this was my way of expressing a very special relationship that I have with my mother tongue, actually.
Actually, if there is that poem around, if you could read it for us.
Yeah, sure. That series of poems that is for various alphabets actually came to be called together as Learning Malayalam.
Okay.
Yeah, and it appears in my collection. I have done for 7 alphabets actually. So, and R was the first alphabet.
Your favorite one, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go with it, which supposedly looks like an elephant. So, on the layer of sand that my forefinger parts, the curvaceous overture begins to reveal an elephant in the line drawing. I taste succulent jungle grass. Say if I held the shell of the first alphabet close to my ear, would it be a tribute to the mammal's memory? Something I need to embark on a journey of language.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Soni. If I could take this to Nim Garu about language and representation, and also his relationship with language. Nim Garu, prasna actually మీ తెలుగు లిటరేచర్ లో రిప్రజెంటేషన్ అనేది ఎట్లా మీరు పర్సీవ్ చేశారు, అండ్ ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు మీరు రాసింది ఏమన్నా మాకు చదవగలుగుతారా, అది కూడా చేయొచ్చు మీరు. సో ఎప్పుడు పాతదన్నా కొత్త లిటరేచర్ అన్నా ఏదైనా పర్లేదు అనమాట.
నా ఉద్దేశంలో చెప్పనా?
చెప్పండి, నేను రాసుకుంటున్నాను. చెప్పండి.
తెలుగు చాలా అందమైన భాష. సంస్కృతానికి అచ్చంగా తన పోలికలతో పుట్టిన కూతురు సంస్కృతం తల్లి అయితే తెలుగు తన కూతురే అదే పోలికలతో పుట్టింది. అందుకనే కర్ణాటక సంగీతానికి గాని దేనికైనా సరే, కంప్యూటర్ గాని సంస్కృతం ఎంత బాగా ఒదుగుతుందో తెలుగు అంత బాగా ఒదుగుతుందని ఈ మధ్యన చెప్తున్నారు చాలా మంది. అసలు అమ్మ జాడని అనుకరించడంలో తెలుగు అంత, అమ్మ అంటే సంస్కృతం అనుకుందాం అందాకని, తెలుగు అంత అందమైన భాష భారతీయ భాషల్లో లేదు. తర్వాత ముత్తినే అంటున్నా, కర్ణాటక ఒకటి, తెలుగు ఒకటి, ఈ రెండు, కన్నడ ఒకటి, తెలుగు ఒకటి, ఈ రెండు ముఖ్యంగా సౌత్ ఇండియన్ లాంగ్వేజెస్ చాలా గొప్పగా తెలుగు భాషతో సంస్కృత భాషతో ముడిపడి ఉన్నాయి. తర్వాత జాతీయత సంతరించుకున్న పదాల్లో తెలుగు చక్కని సామెతలుగా మొదలైంది. ఆ సామెతల్లాగా చిన్న చిన్న వాక్యాల్లో కూడా గొప్ప అర్థాన్ని చెప్పే సామెతల్లా కూడా తెలుగు ఇదిలేండి. ఎప్పుడైతే అన్నమయ్య, త్యాగయ్య, రామదాసు వీళ్ళందరూ భక్తి సామ్రాజ్యమే తెలుగుని చేశారు. భక్తితో సంగీతాన్ని, తెలుగుని ఎంకరేజ్ చేశారు, ఇంప్రూవ్ చేశారు వాళ్ళు మహానుభావులు. అలాగే నన్నయ్య, తిక్కన, పోతన వీళ్ళందరూ రాసిన పద్యాలు, పద్య కవిత్వం కేవలం తెలుగు భాష, అవధాన కవిత్వం కేవలం తెలుగు భాష. ఇది ఎక్కడిది తెలుగు మూలం అంటే ఎప్పటి నుంచో ఉంది. తారీఖులు, దస్తావేజులు ఇవి కాబోయే చరిత్రకు అర్థం అంటారు శ్రీశ్రీ గారు. అలాగా తెలుగు ఎప్పటిది, తెలుగు పాద్దా, తమిళం పాద్దా, ఇలాంటి దెబ్బలాట్లు అనవసరం. తెలుగు ఈ కొత్త తరాలకి బతికించి అందించాల్సిన బాధ్యత తెలుగు వాళ్ళమైన మనందరికీ ఉంది. నా ఉద్దేశంలో ఎన్ని తరాలు నడిస్తే తెలుగు ఇవాళ నడక నేర్చుకుని పద్యమై పాటై నర్తిస్తుంది. ఎన్ని తరాల నుంచి అది వస్తే ఒక క్లాసికల్, ఒక క్లాసిక్ చేయబడినటువంటి లాంగ్వేజ్ గా తెలుగు ఒక గణాలు, ఎత్తులు, ప్రాసలు ఇలాంటివన్నీ ఛందస్సు, ఒక అద్భుతమైన ఛందస్సుతో ఉంది. ఫ్రీలాన్స్ కవిత్వం కాదు తెలుగు, క్లాసికల్ అక్షరబద్ధమైనటువంటి కవిత్వం ఏదైనా సరే ట్రాక్ మీద నడిచిన ట్రైన్ లాంటిది, రోడ్డు మీద నడిచే సైకిల్ లాంటిది కాదు. అట్లాగా ఉండి ఆ శిక్షణాపూరితమైనటువంటి సంస్కృత ధారతో సంస్కృతీకరించబడినటువంటి తెలుగు అన్నమాట అది. నేను
సారీ, అది కొంచెం అడిషన్ ఏంటంటే ఆ క్వశ్చన్ కి, ఇఫ్ యూ కెన్ టెల్ us కి ఏదైతే లిటరేచర్ ఉందో పాత తెలుగుది, గురజాడ అప్పారావు గారు అన్న ఎవరినైనా తీసుకున్నప్పుడు రిప్రజెంటేషన్ అనేది ఎట్లా రాశారు తెలుగులో, తెలుగు లిటరేచర్ లో అది ఉందా లేదా, దాని గురించి కొంచెం చెప్పగలుగుతాము?
ఖచ్చితంగా. అప్పుడు వేమన శతకం ఉంది. వేమన శతకంలో ఎన్ని నీతి వాక్యాలు తెలుగీకరించబడ్డాయి, తెలుగులో చెప్పబడ్డాయి. అలాగే భర్తృహరి సుభాషితాలు ఉన్నాయి. సంస్కృతంలో ఉన్నవి తెలుగులో ఏనుగు లక్ష్మణ కవి అని ఆయన రాశారు. ఖచ్చితంగా ఏ పరిస్థితిలోనూ తెలుగు నీతి నియమ శుద్ధమైనటువంటి కవిత్వాన్ని ప్రవచించింది. తెలుగు సినిమా పాట కూడా చాలా సంస్కారపూరితంగా కొనసాగింది మొన్నటి వరకు కూడా. ఇప్పుడు కొంచెం పాట ఏది మాట్లాడినా తెలుగు అక్షరం ఏదైనా సరే సత్యాన్ని చెప్పాలి, నిజాన్నే చెప్పాలి అనే పద్ధతిలోనూ ఇన్నాళ్ళు కవిత్వం నడిచింది. శ్రీశ్రీ గారు కూడా అదే చెప్పారు. ఏది ఎప్పటికి అవసరమో ఆ కవిత్వాన్ని అప్పటికి చెప్పారు. నేను ఈ మధ్యన ఒకటి వృక్ష వందనం అని ఒక పోయం రాశాను. అంటే నేను రాసింది కూడా చదవమన్నారు కదా, అందుకని ఇది వృక్షో రక్షతి రక్షిత వృక్ష రాజముకు వందనమందాం. సంస్కృతంతో ఓపెన్ చేశాను. వృక్షో రక్షతి రక్షిత వృక్షరాజునకు వందననందం. వృక్షరాజు అంటే రావి చెట్టు అన్నమాట. రావి చెట్టుని వృక్షరాజు, అశ్వత్థము అంటారు సంస్కృతంలో. అయితే జల ప్రళయమే జగతిని ముంచగా బాల ముకుందుడు వటపత్రశాయిగా అలరించే నత్యద్భుతముగా తలచి పులకించే యుగ యుగములుగా. అంటే రావి ఆకు మీద పడుకున్నాడు విష్ణుమూర్తి మొట్టమొదటి ప్రళయం వచ్చినప్పుడు. అదనమాట. హరిహర నామము ఈ అశ్వత్థము ధరసురులంతటి పూజనీయము, పెరుగు వంశమర్చింప వృక్షము, చేర సేద తీర్చు మహాఛత్రము. అంటే అర్థమైందా, చెప్పక్కర్లేదా?
చెప్పండి. నేను లైవ్ అంత ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేయట్లేదు, బట్ చెప్పండి. అది బ్రేక్ డౌన్ చేయండి.
హరిహర నామము ఈ అశ్వత్థము. అశ్వత్థము అని పేరు రావి చెట్టుకి. హరిహరులు ఇద్దరికి అశ్వత్థము అని పేరుంది. ధరసురులంతటి పూజనీయం, భూమి మీద బ్రాహ్మలంతటి పూజనీయమైనటువంటిది ఈ చెట్టు. పెరుగు వంశం అర్చింప వృక్షము. రావి చెట్టుకి పూజ చేస్తే పిల్లలు పుడతారని ఒక ప్రతీతి. అందుకనే పెరుగు వంశం అర్చింప వృక్షమును, సేద తీర్చి మహాఛత్రము, ఆ నీడనిచ్చేటువంటి పెద్ద గొడుగు లాంటి రావి చెట్టు అంటే. అలాగే సందర్శనమే పుణ్యప్రదము. చూస్తే దండం పెట్టుకోవాలి రావి చెట్టుకి. ప్రదక్షిణమున లభించు వరము. ప్రదక్షిణాలు చేస్తారు రావి చెట్టుకి, దానివల్ల వరాలు వస్తాయి. ధరకే తెంచిన కల్పవృక్షం. స్వర్గలోకంలో ఉండే కల్పవృక్షమే ఇళ్లలోకి వచ్చింది, భూమి మీదకి వచ్చింది. హరి సదయునకి ఇది ప్రియ నివాసము. చెట్లో అశ్వత్థ వృక్షాన్ని నేను అంటాడు భగవద్గీతలో. అలాగా వాడికి ప్రియ నివాసం విష్ణుమూర్తికి అని. వటఛాయ సత్యవాక్ ప్రబోధిని. అంటే ఈ మర్రి చెట్టు నీడ నిజాలు చెప్తుంది, నిజాలు చెప్పిస్తుంది. పూర్వకాలంలోనూ అప్పుడు జడ్జిమెంట్లు ఏదైనా గొడవలు వస్తే మంచి చెడ్డ చెప్పడానికి రావి చెట్టు కిందకి రమ్మనేవాళ్ళు. రావి చెట్టు కింద అబద్ధం రాదట, నోటమ్మట నిజమే వస్తుందిట. మరి అది ఎంతవరకు నిజమో తెలియదు. ఇట బాటసారులకి ఇది ఆశ్రయమిడి జనని. బాగా తిరిగి వచ్చిన వాళ్ళకి చల్లటి నీడనిస్తుంది. ఇలాగా ఇటం శాంతం రావి చెట్టు గురించి రాశానన్నమాట. ఇది ఒక క్లాసికల్ డాన్స్ కోసం పాట.
ఓకే, ఓకే, థ్యాంక్స్. నేను ఇప్పుడు థ్యాంక్ యూ సో మచ్ అది చదివినందుకు. నేను రఫ్లీ ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేస్తాను అది. ఆబ్వియస్లీ I can't. Okay, so the question was about what he thinks about the representation in Telugu language literature over a period of time. He started off, I'm going to give a gist of the answer that he gave because it was rather long. So he started off by talking about how Telugu language by itself is a beautiful language because it's considered the daughter of Sanskrit, and that's precisely why a lot of Carnatic music also pulls whether it is Tyagaraja or Ramadasu or Annamaya. Lot of stalwarts in Carnatic music have all sung in Telugu or written in Telugu, and he also mentions some of the more prominent writers in Telugu language like Sri Sri, and also he talks about Vemana Satakam, which is Vemana is a extremely famous poet, ancient poet in Telugu. He talks about how works by Vemana and also and Enugu Lakshmana were all extremely moralistic and inclusive in nature itself, which means that they tried to encapsulate different conditions of life and different situations that life presents to one. So in that nature, originally the poetry that in Telugu language is extremely inclusive in nature, is what he says. And then he talks about how even the lyrics that went into Telugu cinema have been kind of inclusive with respect to, I think he's mentioning the black and white cinema because right now maybe they're not as inclusive as they used to be, whereas if you can think of the generation where Mahanati and those movies came, like of movies of the 60s and 70s, because a lot of Telugu movies in those days were essentially mythological writings. Then after that, he also shared with us a poem that he wrote recently for a dance ballet, and the poem is actually starts off by talking about the importance of protecting trees, and then it goes on, talks about Ravi is the people tree, right? Yes, people tree, and how people interact with it and how language interacts with it, among other things. We can make the poetry available to you later. And my next question is actually towards towards Anusha, and quickly after that, we're actually also slightly running out of time. We're sorry for this session stretching a little bit. Anusha, if you're around.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you briefly about your relationship with literature and how you perceive what was your experience reading, and did you get to read anything Indian language related, and how did that shape your understanding of
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I before I start the answer, so like I really feel like after I came to the forefront and I started writing about a disabled woman's experiences in a new city, the little intricacies and the nuances of it. A lot of my disabled friends who are women also want to come forward and write. So I would like to think of these accounts of disabled women in different circumstances and different situations in life as an archival documents, archival essays, because they've never really been written about or mentioned about, and there's always been a very shallow response to especially women and disability, whether it is in media, in books. To an extent, there have been non-disabled writers writing about the lived experiences of disabled characters. Disabled characters are mostly used, just as a prop to the main able-bodied character. And a disabled character is meant to be alone only in like a movie, for example, or and I've seen this trope a lot, like the sick girl trope. So in books, there's this certain trope that kind of reflects and shows the disabled girl as in need of saving, like she's a damsel in distress, like she's very fragile, and like for example, The Fault in Our Stars, right? And so I would say I haven't really read any certain piece of literature on the plight of disabled characters. Also, I wasn't really exposed to disability studies growing up. We requested to have the psychology of disability in our course curriculum, but no one was there to teach it, for example. So it's like confined to a margin. But yeah, I did grow up in a bookstore, and I like with books around me growing up. They taught me ways of dissent, ways of living. They taught me knowledge of different abilities, and they really helped me in unlearning. And if you have any such book in mind, I would really like it if you could recommend me, like for disabilities in Indian literature, because yeah.
Okay. So I'm actually going to request everybody here, including the panelists and the attendees, to drop in your recommendations in the chat box if you know any books that represent disability properly. And actually, the next question is actually one of the more crucial questions of this discussion, where we are trying to discover, or rather unearth, how disability or the ability challenge has been written in Indian literature over the centuries. I'm saying centuries because we are going to dig deep into how mythological characters that really shape our perspective today have been written. So I'd first direct this question to Nimgaru, and then Sonia and Anusha can take over afterwards. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the question is, I'm going to first read it in English and then take it to Telugu. So this is for Brimgaru, it is, you cover a lot of mythological and social characters. You've also spoken about being inspired by Bapu Ramna earlier. What is your take on characters such as Shakuni in Mahabharata or Mandara in Ramayana, and the genesis of the word Vikalang and its treatment over the years? If you could run us to your take on the characters with disabilities and their portrayals in Indian literature across centuries. నిమ్గారు ఆ ప్రశ్న నేను మీకు తెలుగులో చదవమంటారా? ఓకే, మీరు మ్యూట్ మీద ఉన్నారండి, మీరు అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకోవాలి. సో ఐమ్ జస్ట్ గోనా రీడ్ ద క్వశ్చన్ అవుట్ ఫర్ హిమ్ ఇన్ తెలుగు. మీ రచనల్లో మీరు చాలా పౌరాణిక సామాజిక పాత్రల గురించి రాస్తుంటారు. బాపు రమణలు మీ ఇన్స్పిరేషన్ అని కూడా చెప్పారు. మహాభారతంలో శకుని, రామాయణంలో మందర వంటి పాత్రలపై మీ అభిప్రాయం ఏమిటి? వికలాంగుడు అనే పదంపై మీ అభిప్రాయం ఏంటి? ఇంకా కొన్ని సంవత్సరాలుగా, ఇంకా సెంచరీస్ గా ఆ పదం వాడిన వివిధ రకాలపై మీ అభిప్రాయం చెప్పగలరా? అండ్ బేసికలీ అనేక శతాబ్దులుగా రాసిన క్యారెక్టర్స్ గురించి కొంచెం మైథాలజీ నుంచి తర్వాత ఆ నెగటివ్ షేడ్ ఏదైతే వేస్తారో డిజేబుల్డ్ క్యారెక్టర్స్ కి మైథాలజీలో, దాని గురించి కొంచెం చెప్తారా? మీరు మిమ్మల్ని అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకోవాలండి.
ఒకటి నేను మాట్లాడినా?
చెప్పండి.
వికృత మనస్తత్వమే వికలాంగతత్వం. వికలాంగుడు అంటే ఒక హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ అనే కాదు, మెంటల్లీ హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ కూడా కాదు, క్రూయల్ మెంటాలిటీ గలవాడు వికలాంగుడు అని. ఈ క్రూయల్ మెంటాలిటీ కన్నా ఇక్కడ వికలాంగుడు అని ఇప్పుడు మీరు చెప్పారు ఇందాక, చెడ్డ పాత్రలన్నీ వికలాంగుల్ని పెట్టారా అని. అది కాదు, శకుని అసలు హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ కాదండి, వికృత మనస్తత్వమే తప్ప భారతంలో శకుని ఎప్పుడు హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ కాదు. ఒక సీరియల్లోనో ఒక సినిమాలోనో వాడిని అలా ట్రీట్ చేశారు, వాడి క్రూయాలిటీని బట్టి వాడికి వికలాంగత్వం అంటగట్టి కుంటిగా నడిపించారు. కానీ అసలు భారతంలో అలా లేదు. మందర ఉందంటే మందర మహాజ్ఞాని, తల్లిలా కైకని పెంచింది. లేకపోతే ఆవిడ తనకి చాలా ఇష్టమైన రాముణ్ణి అడవికి పంపేయమని ధైర్యం చేసి సాహసం చేసి చెప్పింది అంటే ఆవిడ తెలివితేటల మీద ఆవిడకి కైకకి ఎంత నమ్మకం ఉంది, ఒక గురు భావన ఉంది, ఒక తల్లి భావన ఉంది. అక్కడ వికలాంగులు ఆవిడ వికృత క్యారెక్టర్ కాదది, ఒక స్ట్రైట్ గా జరుగుతున్న ఓ పనిని పక్కదారి పట్టించాలి రాముడు మహానుభావుడు అవడానికి. రాముడు మహానుభావుడు అవడు అయోధ్యలోనే ఉంటే, అడవికి వెళ్ళాడు కనుక సీతను ఎత్తుకుపోయాడు కనుక. ఇక్కడ ఈవిడకి ఆ మేధస్సు, గూని ఉన్ని వికలాంగత్వం ఉంటే మేధస్సు మాత్రం అద్భుతమైన మేధస్సు అనమాట ఆవిడది. ఆవిడ ఒక అవయవం లోపం ఒక మనిషికి ఇంకొక అవయవాన్ని ఎక్కువ ఎక్స్ట్రీమ్ ఇది చేస్తుంది. లేకపోతే పుట్టింటి నుంచి దాసిగా తెచ్చుకుని గూనిదాన్ని తెచ్చుకోలేదు ఆవిడ, మహామేధావిని తెచ్చుకుంది, తల్లిలాగా సలహా ఇచ్చేదాన్ని తెచ్చుకుంది. ఒక హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ అనేది దానికి ఆ తెలివితేటలన్నీ బ్రెయిన్ లోకి వచ్చేసాయి. అందుకే రాముణ్ణి దేవుడిని చేసిన వ్యక్తిగా మందరిని నేను డాన్స్ బ్యాలే రాశాను ఒకసారి.
నేను ఇది మాత్రం ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేసి మీరు మిగతా ప్రశ్న తర్వాత చెప్తారు, ఎందుకంటే ఇది చాలా రిచ్ గా ఉంది. So for those watching us, I think the points that he made were extremely rich. So I'm going to translate in bits so I don't miss out whatever he's saying.
Okay.
So just translating the bit that he said right now is the word Viklang is the genesis of it. If you look at the Sanskrit genesis of it, or how it gets into Hindi or Telugu or other languages. Correct. So it's basically, he's breaking that down into Vikruta Manastvatvam, which means a cruelty within you. Or a cruelty of mind, like a cruel person, right? That's what the word breaks down to. And over a period of time, that has been assigned to disability. So it has become Vikruta Manasatvam has become Vikalangudu by a different genesis of it, or a Viklang. But the genesis really goes back to calling that individual an individual with a cruel personality. And then he points out, since I asked him the question about one of the most prominent, what we think is a disabled character in Indian literature in the Mahabharata, Shakuni, I asked him about Shakuni, to which he says, Shakuni was never written as a physically challenged character in the Mahabharata at all. In fact, he is supposed to be a cruel character, which is exactly why somebody who at some stage adopted the Mahabharata into writing or into screen or into play has given him a handicap to showcase the cruelty. And it just caught on. That's exactly what he's trying to say about Shakuni's character, that the character was originally in the Mahabharata never written as a physically disabled character at all. And then he speaks about Mandara, the character who has a hunchback in the Ramayana. Mandara is supposed to be the character who has advised Kaikeyi, who's Rama's who's Dasarada's other wife, Bharata's mother. Mandara is the character is actually considered, if you flip the narrative and look at it, it's actually considered an extremely a genius of a woman. And some narratives, in fact one of which he's also written, considers Mandara a kingmaker, rather, if that's a loose translation to what he said, which basically says that Mandara is who convinces or tries to persuade Kaikeyi to go ask Rama to be banished to the forest for 14 years. The explanation to this is, had Rama not gone out to the forest for 14 years, he would have not been considered, he wouldn't have had that story of greatness that he does right now. So Mandara is rather, actually, while she comes with a hunchback, she's actually a genius, and that's why Kaikeyi is actually brought her, because if you look at how the Ramayana describes the relationship between Kaikeyi and Rama, Kaikeyi is supposed to be extremely close to, extremely fond of Rama before. That's what I got till now. Nimgaru, if you can, Meeru continue cheyagala answer. Yeah.
తర్వాత ఈ ఇతను ధృతరాష్ట్రుడు ఉన్నాడు. ధృతరాష్ట్రుడు నిజానికి గుడ్డివాడు, కానీ వాడికి ఆ శక్తి అంతా, కళ్ళ శక్తి అంతా ఒంటి శక్తిగా మారిపోయింది. గుళ్ళు వాడు కౌగిలించుకుంటే ఇనప గుళ్ళు కూడా పిండి అయిపోతాయని అంటారు. అంటే ఒక్కొక్క అవయవ లోపం ఒక్కొక్క దాంట్లో ఎక్కువ తెలివితేటలని బలాలను ఇచ్చేసింది అక్కడ. ఆ కాన్సన్ట్రేషన్, ఇప్పుడు మనం ఏదైనా కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేయాలంటే కళ్ళు మూసుకుంటాం. కళ్ళు మూసుకుంటే మనకి ధ్యానం మొత్తం ఎక్కడికి కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేయాలో ఆ పాయింట్ అక్కడికి వెళ్తుంది. చుట్టూతా దృశ్యాలు చూస్తుంటే డైవర్షన్స్ వస్తాయి. అలాగా అతనికి కళ్ళు మూసేసి శక్తి బలానికి ఇచ్చాడు. తర్వాత అతని వ్యామోహం ఏంటి? పుత్ర వ్యామోహం. అది గుడ్డితనమే. ధర్మాన్ని చూడలేకపోవడం గుడ్డితనం, నిజాన్ని చూడలేకపోవడం గుడ్డితనం. అందుకని సింబాలైజ్ చేసి ఆయనకి కళ్ళు పోగొట్టేసేనా ఉండాలి రైటర్. అది నిజం కాకపోతే, రైటర్స్ వర్క్ అయితే. సో అలాగే ఇంకా కుబ్జ అని భాగవతంలో క్యారెక్టర్ ఉంటుంది. ఆవిడ నిజానికి కురూపే, గౌని ఉంటుంది ఆవిడకి. ఆవిడ మహాభక్తురాలు. కృష్ణుడికి రోడ్డు మీద సెంటు రాసి ఆతిథ్యం ఇచ్చి అందగత్తెగా మారిపోయింది. అంటే మరి గూనెది గుడ్డిది అయినప్పుడు ఆవిడ దుర్మార్గురాలు ఎందుకు చేయలేదు? ఆ క్యారెక్టర్ ని మంచి క్యారెక్టర్ చేశాడు, మహాభక్తురాలు క్యారెక్టర్ ని చేశాడు భాగవతంలో వ్యాస మహర్షి. అలాగే ఒకటి ఏంటంటే, ధర్మరాజు, అదే భీముడు ఉన్నాడు, మహాబలవంతుడు, గొప్ప ఇది. దుర్యోధనుడు కూడా ఈక్వల్. దుర్యోధనుడిలో దుష్టత్వం ఉంది, భీముడిలో లేదే. అందుకని వాడికి వీడికి హ్యాండిక్యాపిడిజం లేదు. వాడు ఫిజికల్ ఇది కాదు. దుర్మార్గం అనేది బ్రెయిన్ లో ఉంటుంది, గూనెతనంలోనో గుడ్డితనంలోనో కుంటితనంలోనో ఉండదు. అది బ్రెయిన్ లో ఉంటుంది. వాళ్ళే వికృత మనస్తత్వాలే వికలాంగులు అని అనుకోవచ్చు అన్నమాట మనం. ఇంకొకటి, ఎప్పుడు కూడా పురాణాలు సింపతి కోసము దేనికోసము హ్యాండిక్యాప్డ్ని చేయలేదు ఎవరిని. అది వాళ్ళ మనస్తత్వాలు ఒకలాగా ఒక్కొక్క రకంగా ప్రతిఫలిస్తే ఒక్కొక్కసారి అలా జరిగిందేమో. కానీ రావణాసురుడు ఉన్నాడు. రావణాసురుడిని చూసి అహో రూపం అహో తేజం అని రాముడి పార్టీ వాళ్ళే మెచ్చుకుంటారు ఆయన్ని.
Mm.
మరి ఎంత దుర్మార్గుడు రావణాసురుడు, వాడి క్రూయల్, వాడంత క్రూయల్ లేడు. వాడినే ఎంత గొప్ప రూపం, ఎంత గొప్ప అందం అని, ఎంత గొప్ప తేజస్సు అని రాముడి పార్టీ, ఎక్స్ పార్టీ వాళ్ళు మెచ్చుకున్నారు. అందుకని హ్యాండిక్యాప్డిజం బ్యాడ్ క్యారెక్టర్ కి సింబలైజ్ ఎప్పుడూ జరగదు.
Okay. So me ఒక చిన్న క్లారిఫికేషన్ అండి. వాట్ యూర్ ట్రైంగ్ టు సే ఇస్ అది బ్యాడ్ క్యారెక్టర్ ని సింబలైజ్ చేయలేదు, కానీ వాట్ యూర్ సేయింగ్ ఇస్ ఉల్టా జరిగింది అని అంటున్నారు.
కొన్ని అలా జరిగి ఉండదు,
ఉన్నాయి కాబట్టి ఉల్టా రాశారు
అంతే.
ఓకే, గాట్ ఇట్. సో
ఇప్పుడు థామస్ అల్వా ఎడిసన్ ఉన్నాడు, ఆయన పుట్టి చెవిడు వాడు. ఆయన చెవుల వల్ల ఏమైంది, ఈ దిక్కుమాలినవన్నీ వినకుండా, చెత్తవన్నీ చెవిలో దూరకుండా ఆయన కాన్సన్ట్రేషన్ బ్రెయిన్ ఏదో ఆయన పని చేసుకున్నాడు. ఆయన గొప్ప సైంటిస్ట్ అయ్యాడు, థామస్ అల్వా ఎడిసన్. అంతకన్నా గొప్ప విశేషం లేదు కదా.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to translate that quickly also. Meanwhile, I know we are running out of time, and we have one quick question around the panel. So if anybody has any questions for the panelists, please drop them in the Q&A box. Getting back to translating what Nimgaru has just said, and after I finish the translation, I'll take this question to Soni and Anusha as well. So continuing from the conversation that he spoke about Mandara, he points out another popular character with some sort of physical challenge, Dhritarashtra from the Mahabharata, and talks about how the fact that he was visually challenged. Actually, it is said that it kind of transcended into him having extreme physical strength, and that actually helped him meditate much higher. And then he says that his weakness was primarily being okay with everything wrong that his sons were doing. He was probably blind. In other words, he was not seeing truth and justice in the acts that were happening around him, which turns into, which is the other word for using that is blindness. That's probably why when writers wrote him, they gave him blindness as a characteristic. Then he goes on to talk about Kubja in the Mahabharata, who's a disciple of Krishna, and points out how Kubja was written as an extremely positive character who was a huge disciple of Krishna. And then he questions why hasn't this character been painted badly? So what he's saying is not every character got the same kind of treatment, while some characters could have been painted negatively. Then he also talks about how, I think, the cruelty and wickedness is actually in the brain, not in the body. That's why sometimes when writing has been written, people have chosen to give different abilities or the lack thereof to characters. To give a counterpoint to this, he talks about characters like Ravana from Ramayana, and talks about how Ravana is also written as an extremely cruel character, but he is not given disability. While there is a lot of intersectionality involved in this, it says that maybe Nimgaru says that maybe everybody is not painted in a similar light. Then he also talks about then he gave the example of someone like Edison, who was born deaf, and has had the capacity to put that concentration elsewhere, and as a non-mythological example. But this is basically what he's trying to drive home. Obviously, the way these characters were painted definitely has had some intersectionality on why a certain character has been written a certain way, depending on their social position. I would actually then take this to Soni and Anusha, if you want to add to this answer. Yeah, Soni.
It's not just about history itself. I mean, if you look at writing in the present or in the contemporary context, you will see that even with film writing, you will see that there was this recent blockbuster in Telugu called Bahubali, and in which one of the characters has a withered hand, and he is also the one who is the evil mind behind the entire story. So again, I see the similar kind of stereotyping in Malayalam cinemas, which I saw recently. So I guess it is also, I think, writers also I choose that easy method of kind of creating a reaction in the viewer or in the reader. I mean, wherein anything that is unfamiliar to you is uncomfortable to you, and that kind of a trope can be used to kind of represent something like evil or something that is conniving or in any of those kind of context. So I feel that it is it probably was kind of in a less informed world as in history, wherein there was lesser consciousness about the disabled status of people and our acceptance of people on an equal terms because they were seen as lesser beings. So I mean, that sort of sense has still not gone away enough from people's minds, as we can see. And I think even in India today, even the government treats disabled people as second-rate citizens, because if you look at even the kind of elements they give to people who are disabled, if you hear the figure, it is outrageous. I mean, how can a disabled person look after himself or be independent at just 1,400 rupees a month? So I think the idea behind making a disabled person feel stronger is to give them the feeling that or give them the means which will enable them to kind of live on par with everybody else. And this seems to continue as we speak here today, and this is a gross injustice. So leave not just writing, but all narratives, contemporary narratives, even though we have become more accommodating and more informed, as is with most of the kind of segregations that happen either with women or everything, I think there is a long way to go.
Yeah.
And of all the people, the disabled people are the least strong to take up their own case.
Thank you so much for that, Sony, and thanks for pointing it out, bringing it into contemporary cinema as well. So I think Nasser's character in Bahubali is actually inspired by Shakuni's. I kind of think that's where it's written from, but yeah, it's one after the other. The same ripple effect is going on.
How would you expect that? I mean, it's happening in a modern movie.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Of course, the setting is mythology. But
yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. Where do you break the process, right? Of
Yeah.
just that inspiration. Yeah.
Right.
Anusha, thank you so much for pointing those out. Anusha, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because if you see, it's kind of a reaction out of the audience, right? And like the disabled character is always the enemy, always demonizing, opposite to the noble hero Amy Ronnie character. And like X-Men, Marvel, these are movies that have again demonized the disabled experience. And if you see Sholay, right, like they have again done that, and especially the I think the government is someone who has the largest influence, and they itself are using words like they are, right? So if you notice, the disabled experience of person with disabilities are always equated to something otherworldly, worldly, like something alien-like, right? Something which is not human. In fact, because the otherness is so much, and in fact they have like a word in I think in Paralympic vocabulary called super crypt. You know, super as in extraordinary. Crip is reclaiming the word cripple. But in this case, super crip is used as a derogatory term for inspirational porn, and the irony of the situation is that, as I was saying in my previous answers, they place us on a pedestal. A pedestal is so high that the pedestal itself is inaccessible. And on the other hand, they also alienate and exclude us, and in all ways possible. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anusha. Thank you so much for the answers, everybody. Now, I would like to quickly urge the audience if anybody has any questions. There's one question that has come in. It says, what are the panelists' thoughts on mental disorders vis-a-vis mythologies and vis-a-vis mythologies, modern and ancient? So flipping that a little bit between how mental disorders were portrayed over a period of time. Anybody with whoever wants to take it, Anusha, Sony. I can't see Bhimgar, but yeah. Anusha or Sony, anybody? Yeah.
I think Sony will be more experienced to answer this.
Sony, if you have anything to add, answer. Do you have anything to add to what are your thoughts on mental disorders in mythologies and modern ancient mythologies? Yeah.
I think being a poet itself, I mean, there is a stereotype about poets being slightly, kind of, what I say, they are people with a different kind of thinking. It is thought, you have to be, people read poetry and they say these days that you are, they say that it is not an ordinary way of thinking, isn't it? So, okay, I think the issues are cannot be seen. I don't think they can be seen in isolation. I think whether they are physical, when there's a physical deformity or a physical disability, it has a mental aspect to it as well. Simply because when you have a disability, there is so much happening at the mind's level itself, and that itself is known to send you into connected a certain disability of the mind itself. Wherein one what do you call difficulty in your life contributes to difficulty in a totally different space itself within you. So I think, and then when you look again at when you look at mental issues, they also kind of contribute to you being dysfunctional in a lot of ways. Physically also dysfunctional in so many ways. So I guess even kind of a lot of people, they might seem normal to you. Or by the popular definition or concept may appear, normal to you, but there is a lot with the current world that makes you, kind of not able to adjust to what you call normal. It can be something. The normal world today is not normal for everyone. That is a wrong thing to think of. I think people react to it in different ways, and with the speed of life that we have right now, a lot more people are unable to adjust to that kind of speed, and that is also the reason why I think a lot of mental issues are coming to the fore.
Yeah.
Things that we didn't know about before, which are being spoken about.
Yeah.
I think eventually it boils down to one point I made right in the beginning. It is a clear lack of compassion in the normal setup of things, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is leading to all kinds of adjustment issues, into both physical and mental.
Yeah. Yeah, that thank you so much. That's such an important answer actually. That was so that yeah, the lack of compassion again, like I think drives back to what you started with. So I actually have, like, I think this is the last question we can take for this panel, and there's also the last panel of the day. So this question's from Xenia to Anusha. Anusha, if you're around. Yes. So the question is, what, according to you, are some tangible ways in which non-disabled folks can make space and pass over the mic when it comes to modern literature and writing? Yeah, and I kind of regret being the moderator at this panel. I'm sorry, like I apologized in the beginning, but yeah, Anusha, if you could take that. Are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. So thank you for the question, Tina. First of all, I think that the central problem is non-disabled people writing disabled narratives, and people who don't really understand disability or intersectionality. You know, writing scripts for movies or writing stories, and also there's also one more thing which I feel is a topic that is avoided a lot is like forming boundaries with family members. Like I had to form many boundaries with family members to urge them not to talk about my disability to others, because it isn't their story to tell. It's my story to tell, and I would do so at my own pace. So yeah, first of all, what we try to do at Revival is we try to, everything is online right now, and we have like a group where we try to make make disabled individuals and disabled allies of the disability community, but at the same time who are non-disabled, to make them talk. But at the same time, when you do something like this, when you carry out a sensitization program, you have to be very careful of not triggering anyone. So like not, because many a times when as disabled people we are recountering ableist experiences, times when we were treated. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, continue talking. I think we lost you for 30 seconds there. If you can repeat what you said.
Yeah. What did you hear till? I'm sorry.
I think we heard. We did not hear it for 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying, when you carry out sensitization programs, you have to be very careful of, making sure not to trigger anyone, not to trigger anyone's trauma, because disability is a very sensitive topic. It's to be disabled is, after all, we go through trauma, right? And many people don't talk about disability and trauma, disability and loneliness. So I think making space for more disabled writers, talk about lived experiences as they experience it, and not like non-disabled people shouldn't take up space, and it has to be treated with compassion. As Sony was saying, we have to treat it with a lot of empathy and compassion. And yeah. So for example, if there is a class, to make it more inclusive, maybe the teacher can pair the disabled child and the non-disabled child. So the main point I'm driving here is that to bridge the gap, the rickety gap between two communities able-bodied and the disabled community. Also, I would also, my last point is that to stop like addressing disabled people as, say, it's also a matter of preference, but I wouldn't like someone telling me I'm differently abled or anything other than disabled, because the disabled community and the able-bodied community are different. And this is the center of the disabled experience. We can only begin enjoying and feeling true disabled joy when we acknowledge and accept this. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Anusha. That was extremely important, and also for you to tell us about the vocabulary and the importance of using it. And for all the other points that you made, thank you so much. We unfortunately don't have much time left, but actually, before the closing, I'd actually like to leave you all with how creatively brilliant this panel is. And I would just like to shout out for everybody here. And so if you want to read Sony's collection of poetries, you have to get the First Contact, which was released in 2020. You can follow Anusha's work with the Revival Disability magazine. Please go to their Instagram page. It is the most vibrant thing you will see today, and that's a promise. And it has some amazing content, which is a must read for everybody. And you can also check out Nim Garu's work Nim Garu has a large body of work, but you can actually look up for most of his cartoons by a mere Google search, which can just type BNIM and type for cartoons. He has a repertoire of social and mythological works in his cartoons, among other things. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Sony, Nim Garu, Anusha, thank you for being here. Thank you for answering all these questions with so much patience. And I'd also like to thank all the attendees and everybody else who stayed on for this panel. And I know it was slightly longer because we also had to translate, but thank you so much for all your patience. I hope we can collaborate again soon. If Mansi, if you could come on to give the thank you note from Indian Novels Collective side as well. I would just like to thank everybody from Belong side for being here. Just a reminder, just a little bit about the work we do. We are a social venture that works at promoting inclusion and diversity through several things that we do. And today you're a part of one of our efforts through the Literature Collective. We have the Belong Annual Literature Festival that happens in July. We have a library. You can log on to belonglibrary.com to check out the libraries and go to your local libraries. You can also follow us on our social media to see what we're doing. We also have a representation in Belong Circle, and we have a research collective and a mental health collective. You can go to our Instagram page and check out all the events that we are doing. My colleague Yoshita is also here. Yoshita has really been working for the Indian Novels Collective X Belong Inclusivity Indian Languages Festival. Our other colleagues who are not here right now, but Radhika and Xenia have also been doing great, and our founder Neerath couldn't be here. Mansi, thank you so much for partnering with us over this. If you could deliver your thank you note on the behalf of Indian Novels Collective. Yeah.
Thank you, Lasya. That was like very encompassing on what Belong does. We do a very one focused thing. We are here to promote Indian literature. Indian Novels Collective is squarely focused on promoting Indian language literature, making it accessible to English-speaking readers through curating translations or translating novels ourselves. We have 2 books coming out this year, which have been in translation with Speaking Tiger. That is Ranangan by, which is Vishram Bedekar. It's been translated by Jerry Pinto, and we have Pachpan Khambe Lal Divare, which was written by Usha Prayamvada and is being translated by Daisy Rockwell. So we are hoping those 2 are out this year. And yeah, we are on social media. We have an active website and blog, And you can head to our blog to read about Indian literature, connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Indian Novels Collective. Our Twitter is down since yesterday. Somebody blocked us out being underage. So we are trying to revive that again. But yeah, and I would really like to thank you, Lasya, and the entire team at Belong for helping us out to get this together. And on the other hand, I would really like to thank Ashwini. Ashwini, would you please come on? I would really like to thank you for guiding us through the entire festival, coming up with the name suggestions, helping us out with ensuring that we have the right kind of speakers for the sessions. And also, I would really like to thank you, Sony, for coming at such short notice and agreeing to do this session with us. And also to the rest of all our participants who are not here right now, but just thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nimgaru. Thank you, Anusha, so much for doing this at such a short notice. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
It's been a
Thank you.
privilege.
Thank you.